Welcome to Poland Daily. Today we'll speak about China with distinguished guest Benedict Rogers, the author of the book China Nexus. In Polish, it's Chińska sieć zła, and that's the copy. So welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Right. I've heard like 2 years ago that the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese state is setting up the network of police stations across the world, and such as in Amsterdam, London, Milan, New York, and so on. I'm not sure if there is one in Warsaw. Are you aware of such an installation here?
I'm also not sure.
Okay, why are they doing that?
I think it is the latest form of what's come to be known as transnational repression, the decision by the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese state, to not only repress people within its own borders, but to reach out well beyond its borders to intimidate, threaten, harass both the diaspora communities, but even foreign critics. And they've done this in various ways. These police stations are the latest tool that they've established.
Of course. Let us start our journey to China, so to speak, from Hong Kong, the place that was the latest addition to the China Empire. Only in 1996, Britain fulfilled its treaty obligation with China. And we all know about what is going on in Hong Kong. We had the protests only 2 years ago. We now have worrying information about the Catholic Church and generally suppression of Christianity. What went wrong?
Essentially what went wrong is, first of all, my country, the United Kingdom, were too naive in trusting the Chinese Communist Party to keep its promises. We signed an agreement with China, the Sino-British Joint Declaration, in which China promised to uphold Hong Kong's freedoms and high degree of autonomy under one country, two systems. And to be fair, they did that for the first 5 or 10 years. I lived there the first 5 years after the handover, and Hong Kong at that time was a free and open society. But over the last 10 years or so, and especially the last 5 most particularly, China has completely torn up that treaty and dismantled Hong Kong's freedoms. I think that China and the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping especially, does not tolerate dissent. And they saw dissent happening in Hong Kong and decided to crack down.
Mm-hmm. How do they do that? Like, what are the steps they are undertaking to lead the Hong Kong into the communist China's main fold, so to speak, or fault, right?
Well, initially, and it built up over the last 10 years, so initially there were small, subtle steps. For example, they disqualified a number of pro-democracy legislators on spurious technical grounds, but essentially the aim was to get rid of them from the legislature. But then, since 2020 in particular, it's become a lot more blatant. They introduced a very draconian national security law in 2020, which resulted in essentially the dismantling of the free press, civil society, pro-democracy, opposition parties. And just recently, they've introduced a second security law known as Article 23. They have also started to deny entry to Hong Kong for foreign activists and critics. I was actually the first person to experience this back in 2017. I was denied entry rather publicly. But just recently, there's been a Polish national who works for the organization Reporters Without Borders, based in Taiwan, who just this week was denied entry to Hong Kong. So these are some of the...
Did he got the Chinese visa and was stopped at the border between China and Hong Kong?
She was stopped upon entry to Hong Kong, and with Hong Kong currently, no visa is required for most European nationals, whereas you do need a visa for China.
Unless they know you, who you are, and they basically screen your activity in social media, and it works.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And also, which is very worrying from our Polish perspective, as we are very involved in supporting and sustaining with Christianity, and especially Roman Catholicism, is that the church is persecuted in China. Let's start from Hong Kong.
Yes, exactly. The persecution of the church in Hong Kong has been evolving in a somewhat more subtle way than is the case in mainland China, but nevertheless it's becoming more obvious. So, for example, a couple of years ago, the Cardinal of Hong Kong, Cardinal Joseph Zen, who was more than 90 years old, was arrested. He wasn't in the end imprisoned, but he was arrested and prosecuted and fined for his activities as a trustee of a pro-democracy organization. The more recent concern is that this new security law may well threaten the confidentiality of the sacrament of confession. And that's a very alarming development. Churches are under pressure to self-censor, so priests will now be very careful in their preaching what topics they preach on.